confusion matrix, the confusion matrix, confusion.
Rolling. Welcome back, Pete. So I think today we're gonna be talking a lot about generative AI again.
Yes, indeed.
Because it's very topical, and this is not a podcast about generative AI, but it is at least in part about generative AI, and it's all anyone else wants to bloody talk about right now. So we feel sort of coerced into it, I think. It's the order of the day right now until it all crashes and no one wants to speak of it like it never existed. Although I can't see that happening either, if I'm honest. But go on. So what do you got?
Well, it's the gravitational pull of the Death Star, right? That's what it feels like. And
it really does.
As you say, we say, oh, we won't talk about that, and then and this discussion that I'm about to kick off was kicked off by sort of again a couple of things in quick succession. One was sort of reading an article which was about the greatness of the new generation of models, so Claude 3.7, etc. And it's someone with a bit of knowledge, and they're going through it and talking about the impact and pulling out a graph of how much better it is than the last version, and the dual impacts of the cost of running these coming down. I don't know if you can come down exponentially, but massively reducing, whilst the capability of training the models exponentially increases. So you've got the two things happening at the same time. So you get much larger amount of data and processing at a much cheaper cost. And so you've got this new generation coming out, and he's got some graph which shows that it's flattening off, but it's still way up there. And he plots this graph against something called a GBQA diamond score, and I was like, oh, okay, better go and look that up. And the basic claim is that these new models have reached what they call PhD level thinking, which was like, okay. And then that phrase is kind of what the article's based around. And whilst just the whole skepticism and the cynic in me just starts to rear its head, actually there were some really interesting things that I want to focus on, really on the positive side, or kind of, I suppose, if you want to posit and go, okay, well, let's assume that that's correct. Now, I did have a dig around on this weird measure, and then found somebody else had written about it and went, yeah, what's kind of happening with these benchmarks is they're not very good benchmarks. They're not very scientific. And so throwing out graphs with comparisons isn't really telling you much of a story.
If memory serves, Sam Altman of OpenAI infamy, has been claiming similar things, and they've got some new plans coming out that lurk in the $10,000 to $20,000 a month price point. That claim to be PhD level assistance of sorts. So it seems like they're all at it.
Well, exactly. And so I think it's because there's this benchmark which at the larger end, but they take different cuts of it, but it's got something like 450 to 500 questions, and they're multi-choice. So I don't know any PhD which is a multiple choice paper, but so you're like, okay, and you give it to an average human, maybe like us, and you're not an expert and PhD in that field, and we'd score about 30% with unlimited time and internet access, and these things are supposedly scoring that or more. But this other blog I went into sort of went, yeah, but look, they're doing this, and they're saying, oh, it's one shot, and really it's two shot, and it's doing this, and it's doing that, and then they're taking this, and then so there's a whole load of shenanigans going on. So it's not quite what you see, but I think it's this general this diamond score, and so people see it and then start talking about it because then on a completely different podcast, not really anything to do with that, but the Michael Manson one. He's the guy of the subtle art of not giving a fuck, and he mentioned as well exactly the same expression. Well, I feel like I've been using it a lot in the last 2 months. He said something like that, and I feel like I'm getting PhD level research out of it, and they did talk about something he did, which was that level. And I thought, okay, so clearly he's heard it, and what the human mind's like. It just becomes a recency thing, and so you end up mentioning it. But clearly as well, he did a piece of research, and they were talking about a piece of research that he got it to do, which had 20 citations in it, was X many pages, pretty thorough. And the guy he works with said, well, you hired me 10 years ago as a research assistant, and it would have taken me about a week to do that, and he got it back in 8 minutes. So, and I thought, well, okay, there's definitely a use case there. So that sort of kind of brought me back to this article where this guy was saying, okay, well, let's make the leap where we don't pretend we don't know what the benchmark is, and we don't know that it's a bunch of multi-choice questions. And we focus more on the fact that this thing can go off and do really good in-depth research, literally a week's worth of work, maybe more, and get it back to you in half an hour. And then this article then said, so maybe with this high level of capability, maybe looking at improving processes and measuring productivity is the wrong thing to measure on it. And he did make a good anecdote, which was, it's like taking the iPhone when it came out and measuring it on how good a phone it is, and you're sort of missing the point. And I thought, and that really got me thinking, if you've got an assistant that can do this really high level of research, and let's say it is really good, then why would you measure it on sort of efficiency, and productivity? Then the flip side of that is, most jobs that we have, the reason why we would measure something on productivity and improving processes and automation is because the jobs that are out there in the world are 99% that. I mean, even out, we're so-called knowledge workers, but even a lot of our job is pulling together that the bit of knowledge with the other bits, and then repeating that. And I just thought, great for research, but how much research is any job? How much research do we really need? Companies have R&D. How big's that? I mean, if you've got a company of 1,000 people, how many people you got in R&D? Way less than 50, I'm guessing. Maybe as low as 2. So I sort of feel like I think he makes a really good point, but I'm looking at work and going, well, so how do these two things fit?
So there's a few things here for me. One is that this feels like a scale to me, right? Small, medium, large, extra large, XXL, so on, right? And so what we've got is preschool, primary school, secondary school, A levels, and so on. And you've heard intelligence is compared to like a chimp or a dolphin or something, right? And that scale has to go somewhere, right? And so you can use whatever paradigm you like, but we're not throwing human-like intelligence into the mix quite yet. That's the whole AGI thing. That's a water that's already been thoroughly muddied. But it feels to me like the PhD level is just the one above degree or postgraduate level. Does it mean you have a PhD student in a box? No. Does it mean more intelligent than the last level and something really high that people think is quite impressive? Sure, right? Why not? And then what's above that, right? Multiple PhDs, doctorates, Sheldon Cooper, Einstein, global superintelligence, godlike omniscience, and you can sort of feel us getting to that point, because when they have to sell the next step up, they've already got to PhD level, right? So where do we go from here? What exactly are they saying? And this is where it sort of falls apart quite quickly, as you point out. Now, let's be clear, what PhDs do is research, right? And so if you are a PhD person, a researcher, and you need assistance with researching any given PhD level thing, be it history or science-based stuff or whatever, having an assistant there that can cut the corner on a lot of library work, a lot of key tapping, I'm assuming is a good thing if it's also accurate. But any PhD worth their salt is going to cross-reference or expect cross-references. If you are an author or a writer or a journalist researching, who isn't a PhD but is researching some pretty crunchy stuff for a book, a novel, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck Part 2, then having something that seems to be PhD level-ish at your disposal feels like it would be a good thing. Would the subtle art guy be up for paying $20,000 a month for that? I find it unlikely. Would Oxford University be up for funding that level of expense for their staff, their research staff? I don't know. I mean, I can see it. I mean, they pay lots of money for lots of things. Would, as you point out, the CEO of a big consultancy fork out all of that for who and how many people? Well, I can imagine there would be some. Would your average big e-commerce player do that? No, right? Who's using that, right? As you point out, maybe a couple of people. Maybe you've got an innovation arm. So I think there's two things going on here. One is that they're just trying to scale this. They're trying to say last time was a number 3 and this one's actually a number 6 and the next one's going to be a 7, 8, 9. And that's obviously both understandable but completely stupid. And I think this is all domain and context specific, which is where this all goes. It all ends up in the same place with me when we start to talk about the value of these things. Is that, well, what do you need doing, right? Well, I need to have my emails organised, and I need to, do some basic research on some potential clients in my sales role. Oh, here's a PhD assistant. I'm like, what do I need a PhD assistant for that? What are you saying, right? No, I don't. I never will, right? And so, how many $20,000 subscriptions can they expect? Well, I assume they're hoping that the universities go all in. But since the Trump-Musk administration is deconstructing the richest universities in the world as we speak, who knows, right?
And he on the back of that, there's some really interesting questions, which is, these things are so sophisticated. And he put a good question, which was, what new capabilities can we unlock? And I thought that was, that's interesting. And I thought part of the reason that's interesting because that starts to spin towards our wheelhouse. What do we do? We roll up to companies who are looking for new angles to unlock existing problems or to think through new ideas and markets to go into, and how can you use data to de-risk that or tell that story, and so it started to make me think of that. And then there's a great quote in here which was just made me laugh, because it's like, and then it really made me think, wow, this is great. If you're thinking about unlocking this capability, then you're not just thinking let's automate the next thing. Then with AI as it is developing really quickly and evolving, then you can't really have a static strategy, because you can't say, all right, well, let's go and use this model for that, and well, let's measure that over the next 8 months, because you're probably going to dump that model off in about 2 months, because there'll be another one that replaces it. And so it sort of talks about how you've got to be quite flexible. And then he says, to quote, moving too quickly to concrete KPIs and leaving behind exploration will blind companies to what is possible. And, and I just thought, wow, well, that's exactly what we talk about, is exploration. And so it really made me think, if you are going to be a company that is going to capitalize on wherever this stuff goes, one of the biggest barriers is going to be exactly that, which is a company moving quick to KPIs. Right, come on, guys. I've now got a team of 50 doing this. Right, I need to get these guys down, get them productive, improve my margins, make more money. We need to scale, get out to more people, and be more efficient. That's what business does. Scale, get more revenue, and then reduce your costs so you get more profit. That's kind of like, the story of every company. All right, we've just gone into a new market, seems to be working well. Well, what's the next step? Well, expand, make it as big as possible and make it as efficient as possible. But this is saying, well, yeah, these models are going to help you in different ways. So you've got to be willing to explore. You've got to willing to say, well, I need to go and look over there, and not think, when I look over there, I will find this, and then I'll go and do that with this. Well, you're exploring. You might find that hypothesis, but you might not. And you've got to be flexible enough to go, well, I went hunting for gold and I found these glass things. Well, if I put those in rings, can we make some money out of that? Whereas if you went for gold and you find these glass things, also known as diamonds, and you go, no, I need gold, then you've missed a trick. But that flexibility is not inherent in, it's not a natural human thing, especially in companies who are just trying to make more money.
Well, and I heard a quote this morning, I think it was on Unhedged, which was, companies exist to plan, right? That's the only thing that they do. You might consider that, a Heinz makes baked beans. Well, the factory makes baked beans, right? The factory will probably continue to make baked beans as long as the supply chains and all that are in place. The rest of the business is all about planning, right? And planning for growth. And the other thing that business exists for is to minimize disruption, minimize potential for things to go bad, right? And so smaller companies can be, and startups particularly, can be quite agile, whereas the bigger you get, the more process and control and bureaucracy is needed to maintain quality and to deliver the right product. And that doesn't mean to say no product innovation, but it tends to be more of the same, right? So what do we do when we're successful at selling baked beans? Well, we want to sell more baked beans, right? So we scale up, we do more of the same, we do it harder, we lean in, we double down, right? And we get bigger and bigger until such a time where we're starting to saturate the beans market, and we need to diversify a bit. But all the diversification tends to be lateral, like adjacency based, right? So we sell beans in tins. Well, beans are basically little protein packets suspended in tomato soup, right? So let's sell tomato soup, right? I have no idea whether this is the way it happened with Heinz. Be interesting to know, but you see my point. That isn't disruptive. That isn't innovation, right? So no one needed at the point where someone says, "Well, we're saturating market." No one needed to tell me that. The market told me that. We need to diversify. It's common sense. I read a book. Whatever. This is what the competitors are doing. What should we do? Someone puts their hand up and says, "How about tomato soup in tins?" No need for an AI in all of that. Right, just not required, and so really, when businesses think they're innovating, they're almost never really are, or may have little pockets that are doing stuff like that. What businesses want is predictability. They want things to look the next day roughly like they looked the day before. And so when businesses get into a bit of sort of commercial or market hot water, or maybe they do stumble across something novel that can really break the mold, they may well take a decision to either innovate or to jump on that particular innovation and reorganize a bit and refactor their KPIs, reorganize their business, buy some new factory space, make some new deals. And the moment that the dust settles on that and say, right, now we're doing the new thing, they're back into protection mode again. They're back into conservative mode.
Yeah.
And the idea that then, so let's say that you add your Gen AI, says you should start making tomato soup at this time, tomato soup that's bright green, because the market's going to love that. Sure, maybe, I doubt that's true, but you never know. That then you're going to say, right, give me some more, right? Because that's all it's there for. Well, you can't do that. Right, your whole business has just had a painful and probably quite costly pivot that you now need to return investment on, right? And this is not new news, right? And this is the trouble that you and me see. You can't, people who do what we do, which is basically transformation focused, can't sit around one business for years on end because businesses can't constantly change. It's just not possible. People don't want it, and businesses just wouldn't function, which is why Google is no longer an innovation hub, right? And that Facebook is really struggling to do so. And so why, right? This isn't something I need always on. We have to be consultants because businesses don't need us there all the time, right? It's just simply not necessary. So I think that's what that article is saying, right?
Yeah, well, and I think the other interesting thing that I really took from it is that whole idea of looking at things differently. And this is where I flick over to that Michael Manson podcast, because he talked about a couple of things that he'd been using it for. And so there was the research task. And then he said, this is quite interesting. And I thought this might be a little tell on the future, was he said, trying to read non-fiction books is becoming more and more difficult, because now he just puts effectively a knowledge-based chat over, just feeds in the book, says, oh, here's the article, right, and then starts chatting about it. And so that interactivity with what we all know as RAG, as the augmented with the data that you're interested in, means that now, rather than having to read 12 chapters, it could be a fairly sort of dry subject, or jumping into a certain chapter, he can start off not knowing much, having a chat, the bot's coming back to him and saying, oh, well, it means this, that and the other, and then it's chatting through and getting to what interests him, because it's interactive. It's hearing what he's saying and asking, and then going to the text and then pulling out the points that the text has, but interacting with him. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. He said, I think factual books are going to run into a real problem, which is a problem for him because he writes factual books, right? Because people put this layer over them and consume them in a completely different way.
I'm deeply dubious of this, right? I agree in the sense that the format has to probably evolve, right? But to a degree, but just like it did with the internet, like where if you've got a textbook on programming, you've got online notebooks or code files that you can go and download and run yourself, blah, 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 right? The problem I've got with this is that AI models are inherently conservative. They're inherently reductive, right? It's what they do. It's the only thing they exist for, is to take things and reduce them, right? And if you read a good non-fiction, textbook, it's not just from A to B. Here's the subject, here's how it works, and here's some examples. It's examples, digressions, case studies. It is opinion. And it is they will take any given textbook will take a stance, even if it's on a programming language. It will be here's Python for data science, right? Or here's how to do fast data science with Python, because there's 100 Python for data science books out there. So where's your angle, right? So any given article or textbook, anything new that expects to get anything other than exist as clickbait is going to need to take an angle, and that's where the interesting stuff comes out. It's not just a sales thing; it's it allows you to talk about things in a different light. And what worries me is not only if you take it from a monolithic book perspective, i.e., this book is about cheese making. That you're going to have a RAG style conversation with an AI about it. It's going to tell you about cheese making, but you're missing a whole bunch of other stuff in there that maybe doesn't make sense in fragments, and therefore will be largely ignored by the model, or is just by the by. But actually, if you read it in context, it provides a whole bunch of extra information, context, and I always come back to the fact that part of the reason that LLMs are so powerful is that language is already very, very efficient, right? Human language. It may not seem like it, but if you go on to Blue Sky or X or whatever, the old school 144 character limited micro posts, the amount of information you can cram into 144 characters is mind-blowing, right? And the reason that is because of context. You and me arrive at the table to talk having a whole bunch of prior information that allows you to say something, and for me to understand a mountain of information without you actually having to explain any of it. Because if you were to just go, yeah, right, Trump, you know what I mean? This is how a lot of comedy works, right? Yes, yeah. I do know what you mean, right? I definitely do, right? And it's like, you could mean quite a few things, but generically you've taken a tone. And I think that when we start to get to the washed out language of highly Americanized large language models, translating what seems to be the median path through a textbook or a narrative or an explanation, it might well give you the right answer, but it doesn't give you everything you need, right? And it doesn't give you the room to elaborate, right? It sort of robs you of all those little hooks on the side that make you think of different things. And when you think about that, how this conversation started is you making a comparison between two articles that were completely different, right? That weren't at all related other than via the bigger bracket of Gen AI in the research area, and you're taking points of view and you're synthesizing them. And I don't think, I worry that Gen AI is going to start making this stuff less and less likely. It's going to start stripping out all the character and all the digressions and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, if you've ever read Jesus, what's his name? Taleb Nicholas Nassim. I can't ever remember which one's going in what order. Right, his books are one long digression, right? But they make sense, and it's all of the extra bits. It's the Black Swan guy, the Fooled by Randomness guy, right? Yeah. It all makes some sense, but there's anecdotes everywhere, and part of the richness of his writing, even if you might find it quite annoying and not to the point, is that he pulls in all sorts of things that people can relate to and sort of mixes them around, and you've got a cocktail, right? You came in, thought you were going to have a gin and tonic, but you got some elaborate cocktail that tastes better, right? And I think that Gen AI, LLMs are the enemy of that, and I think that's why I don't think we've seen the back of textbooks. I think people are going to get bored with this approach.
Well, I agree partly and disagree with that end statement. And partly because he then went on to give a really good example. He was saying basically what's happening here is we're probably getting a new medium, and he used a really good example actually of some app where you drop in, and he was saying like, and he used Harry Potter. So you basically say, oh yeah, you drop into this Harry Potter world, and then you start interacting effectively with the books. But then because you can say, oh God, I found Malfoy so annoying, so I don't want to deal with him. So he's suddenly taken out the picture. So all your interactions with the characters are not that. Now, absolutely to your point, is that you've lost the, Malfoy was a good character and is written and it's part of the driver of the book and everything. And you've now decided you don't want him. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you're not getting the fullness. But on the other hand, I've now got my own sort of interactive novel and I'm going places which the original didn't do.
Which is something that nobody asked for, right? We have interactive novels. They've existed since the early 80s, and they are very niche, and they exist in the tabletop gaming community. There's whole communities around them, but they're certainly not mainstream, right? People don't want to choose their own adventure. You know what I mean?
Right. But remember, most of the stuff that we have now, we didn't ask for. Nobody asked for YouTube. No one asked for influencers. No one asked for social media.
Yes, but we did have television, right? We did have video cameras. We did have You've Been Framed.
Exactly.
But this is the thing. We've had Super 8 since the early 70s. People, the ability to make your own films did turn up because people did want it, right? The ability to take someone else's art and rearrange it, right? I mean, I'm going to slightly contradict myself here simply because I've just been watching the video again, the 2006 video on the Amen break, which I think is on YouTube. If you've never seen it, it's one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. It's actually not, it's just a record spinning for most of it, but it's what the guy says about the Amen break and how important it is. And that's literally taking someone else's art and cutting it up and creating whole new genres with 6 seconds of music, which I think is amazing. But the thing is, that came about because of a technology that people did want, right? I find this idea, I'm not saying that no one wants to be able to mix and match Harry Potter, and we have fan fiction for that very reason. But the thing is, Harry Potter is a construct of J.K. Rowling's brain, whatever you think of her. And the reason why all the 10 million extra Dune novels that his son wrote, Frank Herbert's son wrote, are not very much liked, even though he keeps on making them, because Dune was a product of Frank Herbert's brain. It wasn't Dune that was the point, it was Frank Herbert's brain at that moment in time. Remixing that is so beside the point as to not understand what art is, right? And that's
by that means you'd say, well, taking your Amen break, well, that's not the point, that's not art, no one will ever listen to that, and it won't become the backbone.
No, it's a completely different point.
Exactly what
it's a completely different point, right? Because Amen break is a 6-second piece, right? And the whole sort of sample and loop culture of the early 80s was all about paying homage to things but making them into completely new forms. That's not what we're talking about here, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about taking a world or a narrative or a set of characters and remixing those for mass consumption, and that's been possible. Look, just go onto Audible, go onto Amazon, and look how many Sherlock Holmes novels there are, right? There are thousands now because it just went out of after Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's copyright period, like 75 years, something like that. And so anyone can write Sherlock Holmes novels, and there's so many of them, and they're not mainstream. Sherlock Holmes is mainstream, right? Arthur Conan Doyle is mainstream, and I think that yes, I'm not saying there's no market for this, but the idea that that's going to supplant traditional forms of writing, be it fiction or non-fiction, I think is nonsensical. The reason that you write a book on a subject or you write a novel on anything is because you have a perspective on that. People want that perspective. The artist cannot be removed from the art. The art and the artist are the same thing, right? people bring their own perspectives when they consume the art, but they consume it because of the existence of the artist. And now if a piece of art is made to be remixed, for example, both I think Radiohead and Nine Inch Nails both recorded sets of stuff specifically to be remixed, right? Literally, there are no songs here, there are only parts of songs. Go for your life, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is not mainstream. And I would also argue, and I'm going to get off my soapbox here because I clearly have a lot of opinions on this, that I already have, the world already has remixable novels. They're called games, right? They're called Grand Theft Auto. They're called Final Fantasy 9000, whatever on that. You know, they've been around for again since the 1970s, right? And arguably, that's exactly what Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons are. Again, we've already got it, right? So where does AI exist in all of that? It's just facilitation again, right?
Well, exactly, but facilitation creates massive channels. I mean, what social media except for facilitating people getting together and chatting to each other?
Yes, but we didn't already have social media. We had social, right? And we got it mixed up with the read-write web, right, in Web 2.0. But we already have remixable stuff. Want remixable non-fiction? We have it. It's on Google, right? You just watch the videos in whatever order you want.
Yeah, but you already had portable music. Why did you need the iPhone, the iPlayer?
Yeah, but it didn't bring much else to the party. It just brought volume,
but
right?
It's completely obliterated the previous thing.
But it hasn't. It obliterated the technology. It didn't obliterate the paradigm. Nothing's changed. You can just do more of it.
That's my point. I'm not saying that you won't be writing novels. I'm saying you get a factual novel, and a whole generation of people are going to go, well, the way I interact with that is I put a knowledge base over it. And then people like you and I will go, yeah, but you're missing a whole bunch of reading it. And they'll go, yeah, there's a whole generation of people
it was called
watching linear TV.
They're going to say, it's called Grand Theft Auto, right? We've already got it. It's already, like, look.
Yeah,
you can. Do you want the last word? Because I love having the last word, but you can have it if you want.
Well, I do, because I think that what it's saying is that there's and both of these articles are basically saying, if we look at the world as a bit like we're saying there, and looking at the old world and saying, I don't see of this old world what this new thing's going to give me, then we're sort of missing the point. And that's the bit that I'm really keen on looking at is, absolutely right. Why would you invent something that you've already got hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people are already interacting? Because they can get a Harry Potter novel and essentially, like you say, play a game, and it's not written for them by the people that write Grand Theft Auto. I've not got to wait 9 months. I might have to wait 9 years for a new Harry Potter novel, but meanwhile I can play my own game tailored to me for the next 2 years. Now that doesn't exist right now until someone writes that next game. Now, I'm not saying it's going to put the gaming industry, it's a new thing which is going to come in, which a whole bunch of people are going to use.
I think we've already got it, but maybe we're talking at cross purposes, right? So I'm willing to agree that I'm willing to concede that we might well just be arguing the same point somehow in an obtuse way. Or we're cross purposes, but we will be able to do this for a long time, I can see. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I will denote your last speech as the last word, and consider the matter closed for the moment. Although I'm quite happy to open it up again at some point. I'm just gonna. That was a very fruitful and passionate conversation. And if anyone else wants to understand my views on art, I have another podcast called Art Against Mental Illness, where I talk about precisely this sort of thing weekly. So go and find that in your podcast hole, wherever you dig your podcasts up from, and listen to me gibber on about this type of crap. There's plenty more of that. Maybe I'll have Pete on it soon. You kind of come on as a guest. Yeah, why not? We can have this argument over there too, or maybe I'll just cut and paste it. Anyway, I've got a little thing, right, that I think can turn into a big thing. Just so I've got a thing to bring to the table. which is are just noting what fun the tech stocks are having at the moment. Again, I'm referencing this today's Unhedged, where this is being recorded Friday the 14th of March. There's an Unhedged, I think was out today or yesterday, was talking about the fact that, yes, Donald Trump is playing fast and loose with the American economy on tariffs and whatever other shenanigans. We could have a long conversation about all the potential side effects of his and President Musk's behaviour. But what they noted was that the large amount that's been wiped off the American stock market, that the main body of that is tech stocks, and particularly the Magnificent Seven: Google, Facebook, Tesla, Microsoft, Amazon, and Nvidia. Probably another one. Don't know. Did I say Meta? Can't remember. And that's kind of curious because the tariffs affect people who move stuff around, right? So Tesla, yes, okay, sure, but there's a whole bunch of other reasons why Tesla price should not be what it is. But the rest of them, like, with tariffs on bloody, European wine or whatever the hell they're talking about today, this stuff doesn't affect those companies. So why have they crashed? And so there was a couple of opinions on that. One of them is that the investors are looking to de-risk their portfolios, and simply to do that, you'll take the parts of your portfolio where it's sort of safest to remove them, because you've already made large amounts of gain. I think everyone thinks the Magnificent Seven is overvalued. No one wants to blink first, but if you're at the point where you're being forced to blink because someone's poking at your eye, right, go, well, fuck it, I've made loads on Meta. It's been looking a little bit unwell, so let's just cash out now while we're ahead, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that seems completely plausible, but I don't think you can remove the AI aspect of this with the Salesforce guy whose name's gone again. What was his name? Benioff saying that Gen AI, they've got Gen AI plugged into their platform, broadly speaking, a CRM platform. I realise it does more than that, but the Gen AI component won't contribute anything really to their bottom line, despite having been plugging it to buggery for a year or something. And stock market cap, right? It's just like that's, if they go down, they take a whole bunch of other stuff down with them. So yeah, I don't know if we're seeing the bubble bursting, but I do think that there's a waft of stale AI going on here. I don't know if you've got a different opinion.
Well, I listened to the one before, and they were talking about the file sale, and some guy who's very China skeptic, and so they were talking specifically about Chinese stocks. But he reckoned that you kind of got two ends of the spectrum. You've got a very overpriced tech market in the US, and then you've got a very underpriced Chinese market, because everyone's kind of spooked about Chinese government involvement in any company. And he said, and then suddenly you've got this fire sale going on where suddenly people are like, right, I need to get out of US stocks. And he said, yeah, maybe some of that's driven by, well, yeah, okay, time to make my money, things are getting too risky. And and again he was saying, well, and so that's probably not the right answer either, and suddenly just get out completely is probably wrong. And he was saying, no, so you don't certainly, and the same thing, you certainly wouldn't want to get into China in a big way, but he was saying that China's probably underpriced and the US is probably overpriced, so there's probably a middle ground here where having a bit in both is probably a good thing. And so that was about, that was the previous one. But yeah, it definitely seems to be some jitters, and if you listen to some of the people talk about what Trump has said about that, he's talked a few times about I don't know what he calls it, a repositioning of the market. And I think it was on the Unhedged last week that was saying, well, repositioning, you're probably talking about a 20 to 30% drop or something ridiculously large like that.
Yeah.
And they're saying, in the market are jittering at a couple of percent, let alone, 15, 20%. So saying if there really is a repositioning coming, then a lot of people are going to be unhappy.
Well, and a lot of pensions are going to go south, and a lot of pensioners who would probably have ordinarily been a Trump supporter may not be anymore.
Yeah, and just the thing there is, I mean, it's a bit like Brexit. So the American people might now say, well, actually, this is not what we asked for. And let's say it does go south. Then everyone's really peed off. Everyone feels it in their pocket. But you ain't got an election for 4 years, guys. So a bit like Brexit, well, we might not like it after it's happened. But you're now paying for it for the next 10, 15 years. I mean, you know, and as we found, it doesn't really matter you vote in or out. You still got the pain because you're not going back in. And if they make too much damage with what they're doing, via the stock market or whatever, then it's not fixable by, just change your mind back. If everyone sells tons of shares, they're not going to come back the following day because,
So agreed. I mean, I think the jury's out on the downstream effect to Europe. Europe is certainly looking a little bit more peachy, and I think there will be an increasing desire to disassociate ourselves or to mitigate the risks of our eggs in the American, all being in the American basket, not least on obviously defence, but all the main social networks are based out of there, and they're not really doing the sorts of things that the European Union at least finds palatable, and that we could see a situation where these things start getting restricted in Europe and perhaps the UK. And so what does that mean for business? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to go too far down that road. But what I do think is that it is an opportunity for Europe to, build its own tech market, a virtual Silicon Valley for European equivalents of a lot of these technological entities that are America first. And that's going to create a lot of opportunities for people like us. And I can't tell you that what Trump's doing, particularly with regards to Ukraine, is good for all of us. But there are silver linings, and I'm hoping a little bit more growth potential on the tech side, at least, is one of them. But I think there's a lot to play out before we find that out.
Yeah, indeed.
Right, I'm going to draw this to the close. It's been absolutely thrilling to debate with you, and we'll be back soon with something else to argue about, presumably.
Excellent.
Right,
Cheers.
The confusion matrix. Confusion.